Okay.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah, I saw his nice one leg here.
Absolutely. And I need one too.
Thank you. Why didn't it staple all or three-hole punch all of them?
That's awesome.
So I'm super weird.
Almost there.
It's like this batch in the middle is three-hole punch. I told it to three-hole
Well,
punch.
it's just worked out.
That's right.
Like bent, like a crunch, you know?
I'll put that one back because I already got one.
Oh, okay.
You're like pushing the bottom of your feet down into the ground. And then you like just keep your head straight. You just do like really small crunches. It burns quite a bit. You can do it with weights too. Yeah, if you do like, I do like 2 sets of 20 or something. It's really weird.
So you're laying flat on the ground,
Yeah.
and you're trying to get your back flat.
Your lower back, you just pretend like you're pushing your lumbar into the ground. And you do that by flexing these muscles. You want to make sure those are flexed. So you can kind of see it.
Okay, let's go ahead and start.
Alright, yeah, this is
Okay, so we're going to continue onward with our discussion of the pelvis and the perineum. So today's topic is the reproductive systems. We'll go through and do just an overview of each system just as a refresher. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it, but we'll just kind of cruise through it real quick, and then we'll go back and touch a few points that I want to highlight. Okay? So first we'll start off with the male. So we have the testis where the sperm is produced. That then moves into, the sperm move into the head of the epididymis and travel from the head down through the body and down to the tail of the epididymis as they mature. So that's the location of sperm maturation. From then passes up through the ductus deferens, which remember pass through the inguinal canal here and move into the pelvic cavity over the lip of the pelvic rim there, pelvic inlet. They then come down behind the bladder and then widen out into what we call the ampulla of the ductus deferens, so just a widened area. And right at the far end of the ampulla is where we have joining of the seminal vesicles here. And the seminal vesicles produce about 75 to 80% of the volume of the semen. So it's going to be a matrix of sugars to help nourish the sperm, protective factors, all of that. And then after the seminal vesicles join with the ductus deferens, they become known as the ejaculatory ducts. So this is a name change of the same tubule. Those pass then through the posterior lobe of the prostate and empty into the urethra. Just below the prostate, we have one last gland, the bulbourethral gland, and that is producing a alkaline fluid that neutralizes the acidity of urine before ejaculation, so that the urine left over in the urethra does not kill the sperm.
Can you go back?
Yeah,
Please.
sure. We can go through that more slowly.
So after the seminal vesicles join with the ductus deferens, it's called what?
The ejaculatory ducts. So it's just a name change there.
And then
And those pass through the posterior lobe of the prostate and empty into the urethra. Remember the seminal vesicle ducts that we saw in the prostatic urethra. Okay. Then travels down the urethra, and just after the external excuse me, urethral sphincter, we have the bulbourethral gland emptying its fluid into the urethra, and that's a alkaline fluid that neutralizes the acidity of leftover urine to protect the sperm as they're traveling through the urethra.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, know the pathway. It's a good thing. So I just want to go back and look at a few details along that pathway. So first we'll start off with the testis and epididymis. So the testis is filled with these seminiferous tubules here. And this is where the sperm is actually produced. So there are stem cells within these seminiferous tubules that are constantly dividing and producing the precursors to sperm. And then the DNA gets supercoiled into the head of the sperm, and the tail that is attached and all of that. Excuse me. And the seminiferous tubules. Then moves into the ret testis here in the mediastinum of the testis. And those then lead through efferent ductules into the head of the epididymis. And in the head of the epididymis, there's this huge mass of coiled tubes all the way through it. And as the sperm move through these tubes, they are matured. So what's the word I'm looking for? They're packaged into the final form of the sperm, and they receive all of the inputs into the head of the sperm that they need to be able to survive through their journey into the excuse me, the female reproductive tract. Okay? Right, so then at the tail of the epididymis is where we then transition into the ductus deferens. So here the ductus deferens then moves up this way and continues on up the spermatic cord. Okay. I want to point out also, we studied in lab the tunica albuginea, so that little flap of tissue that we peeled off the surface of the testis. Outside of that is the tunica vaginalis, and this is the remnant of the processus vaginalis.
So you said that it moves through the efferent ductules, and then what happens at the head of it?
So it moves into the epididymis, and basically the epididymis is just this massive coil of tubes that the sperm moves through as it matures. Okay, yeah, so.
Does it then come back down?
Yeah, so it comes all the way down to the tail of the epididymis, so it kind of just cruises along here and maturing as it goes, and then moves into the ductus deferens and then back up.
From the tail, though?
Yes, from the tail, correct. So the ductus deferens is traveling all the way up through here behind the testis. Right? Okay, so like I said, the tunica albuginea capsule, it's made of connective tissue. Then we have the tunica vaginalis, which is the remnants of the processus vaginalis. And then we have the ligamentous remnant of the processus vaginalis, which I spelled that wrong. And we'll talk about what happens when this does not completely close off in a little bit. Okay, any questions, more questions about this? You good? Okay. All right, so here's another view showing cutaway of the ret testes here. So you can see it's again a little meshwork of tubules intertwined with all of the vessels that provide blood flow to and from. And then it also shows the epididymis, a little bit better, how it's just this coiled mass of tubules all the way along until it moves into the ductus deferens. So I like this figure for those two reasons. You can see here that in the lobule of the testis, those are all those seminiferous tubules that are all packed in there. That's the site of the sperm generation. Okay. Remember, we have the testicular artery providing blood flow and the piniform plexus draining the blood from the testis. Okay, so then if a male wants to control fertility, so they have an option of having a vasectomy performed, and this basically is just a ligation of the ductus deferens. I think I mentioned it before. Unlike the tubal ligation in women, we do this vasectomy in the scrotum, so it's easy access. We don't have to worry about damaging too many other structures. Interesting thing is it can be reversed within 7 years of the initial ligation. And there's about a 93% regaining of fertility in those reversals of the vasectomy. Okay. So then, when I was talking about the ligamentous remnants of the processus vaginalis, in some males that doesn't all the way close off, and remember it's an outpouching of the abdominal wall. So if the process does not fully close off, we can get drainage of fluids from the abdominal cavity into the scrotum and surrounding the testis. Excuse me. This typically first manifests in the infant or young child because it's just an open canal and is going to allow fluid to drain down into the testis. It can cause problems with fertility because of increased pressure on the testis. Yep.
What's the infertility called?
Compression of the testis. Okay, so infertility. And it can also cause some discomfort as well. Okay, so this is a patent processus vaginalis. Okay.
What's the abnormal one? Is the breathing process?
Yeah, that is that one. This is normal here on this side. Excuse me. Yes.
Did you say that happens when the ligamentous remnant isn't closed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so in a normal situation, that closes off and becomes a solid cord. But if it doesn't close off completely, then you have that abdominal fluid draining into the testis. Okay, we good? Okay. All right, so this is just a reminder, the prostate gland surrounding the entire urethra has all of these ducts to allow the prostatic fluids to come into the urethra. We have the openings of the ejaculatory ducts here on the posterior wall, so then the ejaculatory ducts would have been coming in kind of that direction. And then just a reminder that the internal urethral sphincter, one major reason why it's important in males is because that again gets closed off during ejaculation so that there's no leakage of urine, which would kill the sperm. So. That's not legible at all, my goodness. Okay. And so that is one reason why it would be smooth muscle rather than skeletal muscle, so it can be autonomically controlled. The autonomic nervous system is involved in a lot of sexual responses, physiological responses. Okay. All right, so common prostatic abnormalities. We've touched on them before. I just wanted to show a couple of pictures. So we'll start off here on this side. This is benign prostatic hypertrophy. Oh dear, I'm not gonna be able to spell benign today. N-I-G-N, there we go. Okay, and it typically happens within the central zone of the prostate gland. So we've got a central zone here, kind of you can see it outlined here, and then we have a peripheral zone kind of tucked in behind here. So typically the hypertrophy occurs in the central zone. Conversely, prostatic cancer typically occurs in the peripheral zone, typically of the posterior lobe. And you can see here a tumor causing a malformation in shape, so as opposed to just a overall enlargement, but retaining the basic shape, we have this nodule protruding out of the prostate for prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is actually the #1 cancer in males as far as occurrence. In females, the #1 occurrence for cancer is breast cancer. Okay, are we good? All right, and then remember I talked about the tympaniform plexus draining the blood from the testis. We can get enlargement of those veins just like we would get in hemorrhoids or esophageal varices, and we call these varicoceles, so enlargement of the tympaniform plexus. Okay. This can cause problems again with fertility. Can make the testis feel heavy, kind of a dragging, heavy feel to the testis. And some of the causes can be either insufficiency or absence of the venous valves. Okay, so remember we've got the valves within each vein helping to prevent backflow in the vein. If those aren't working properly, that can allow pooling of blood in these veins. So valves not working. Also sluggish blood flow. So if somebody just doesn't have very good blood flow, then we have this enlargement of those veins of the tympaniform plexus. Also anything that obstructs the blood flow, so enlarged lymph nodes. Can also obstruct blood removal through the tympaniform plexus. Okay. All right, so that is the male reproductive system. Let's go on to the female reproductive system. So this is just an overall view, a reminder that the round ligament of the uterus passes through the inguinal canal. So here's the inguinal canal here. And then comes up and attaches to the lateral margins of the uterus. We'll go through each of these sections in detail, so I'm not going to belabor this slide so that I don't repeat myself too many times. So we'll just kind of forge ahead. So first of all, we just want to identify the ligaments that stabilize the female reproductive structure. So we've got the round ligament here, we just talked about. And then we have the broad ligament here. And the broad ligament is made up of three parts. The mesometrium, which is the part that's closest to the uterus. And we have a cross section here. It's kind of small, but this is from a figure in your book, so you can refer back to it. Here's the mesometrium kind of coming down this area here. We have the mesosalpinx, and salpinx just is a word that refers to the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes. So that's a suffix that's often used in reference to something with around the uterine tubes. So this is the part that's closest to the uterine tube. So here we have it up here, the salpinx here, mesosalpinx. And then the final section is the mesovarium, which is the little part that goes out towards the ovary. And you can see that here, right next to the ovary. Okay, so know those three divisions of the broad ligament of the uterus. Any questions? You all good? Okay. All right, so then the uterus. Here's another one of our funduses. So we've got a fundus of the uterus, that muscular dome structure at the top. The main part is called the body, and then the opening into the uterus is the cervix. Then from each of the superior lateral portions, we have the uterine tube extending from the uterus. Okay, so then let's talk about the uterine tube a little bit more. And as the tube moves away from the uterus, it enlarges in diameter. We have another ampulla. So you could think ampulla is just an enlargement of a tube. And then at the opening, we have this kind of cup-shaped infundibulum with finger-like fimbriae at the opening. And these sweep the ovum into the fallopian tube or the uterine tube. Okay. Excuse me. Remember, the ovary kind of sits inside that infundibulum here, and releases the ova from its surface. Okay, so then, were we good there? Okay. So then, if a female wants to prevent becoming pregnant, she can do a sterility treatment, tubal ligations. And so that is a ligation of the uterine tube here. They can do an abdominal surgery that to perform the procedure. And here's a couple of different methods. We have the Ukaida method and the Pomeroy method. You don't need to know those, just some variations on the theme of tubal ligation. Also, they can also cauterize a section of the uterine tube, or apply a Hulka clip to pinch off that uterine tube, and these can be done laparoscopically. Okay. Now, within the pelvic cavity, the uterus can have several different positions. It doesn't move around in an individual. It's a particular position within an individual. And the position is defined by several axes. So we have the axis of the vagina, so coming up through the vagina, the axis of the cervix, and then the axis of the uterine body. Each of those defines a flexion point. So between the axis of the cervix and the axis of the vagina, we have the angle of anteversion. Okay, so that is these two. Between the axis of the cervix and the axis of the uterine body, we have the angle of flexion. So, okay, normal is, or the most common, I should not say normal, most common is anteflexion here. So the uterus laying over the top of the bladder, and anteverted. So both of these angles fairly small. Okay. So here we have again normal, what they're calling normal, anteverted, and anteflexed. So coming up over the top of the bladder. We can also have retroverted. Okay, and so remember, the version means the angle between the vagina and the cervix here. So that means that angle here is straighter rather than flexed. Okay. And then we can also have retroflexed, which means that the angle between the cervix and the body